Ah ha ha! Welcome back to DepDiv Podcast, the only geopolitical podcast hosted by a German shepherd with tenure and zero respect for HR guidelines. I'm your host, Maple. If you're expecting trigger warnings, safe spaces, or gentle corporate euphemisms today, you must have bumped your head on the way out of the doggy door. Go find a golden retriever to lick your feelings. Around here, we chew on raw meat and hard truths. Today, we are sniffing through the garbage heap of global diplomacy, specifically analyzing a recent commentary by Tao Jie on the U.S.-Iran peace negotiations. Now, Western diplomats love a good peace summit. They get to wear tailored suits, fly on private jets funded by your tax dollars, and sign pieces of paper that make them feel like they've earned a spot in a history textbook. Tao Jie looks at this latest U.S.-Iran circle jerk and calls it exactly what it is, a completely deceptive, utterly futile diplomatic exercise. It's a World Cup halftime state rather than the end of a war. It's the political equivalent of trying to train a feral cat by shaking a bag of treats through a chain-link fence. You're not civilizing it, you're just showing it where the food is. So here is how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the U.S.-Iran peace mirage, then dig into the history of tactical treaties, expose the massive loopholes in this current memorandum, lay out Iran's 3 strategic cards, and finally, look at why this whole diplomacy thing is just a halftime break. Let's get into it. Section 1. The U.S.-Iran peace mirage. Let's establish just how incredibly fragile this current 14-point memorandum actually is. They've got this 60-day window to sign a formal agreement, and it is already fraught with tension. You've got outside threats of U.S. airstrikes, plus the massive looming uncertainty of American political cycles. I mean, think about it. If a new administration steps into the White House, this entire framework could be scrapped on day one anyway. The whole thing is hanging by a thread. And then you have to look at the money. $6 billion. That is the staggering amount of unfrozen assets released for so-called humanitarian goods. Some commentators view this as necessary relief for the Iranian people. Others, well, they see it as a deeply flawed compromise that literally just hands financial breathing room straight to the regime. Moving on to Section 2. Let's look at the history of tactical treaties, because history never actually repeats, but it sure does rhyme. Tao Jie's argument centers on a massive misunderstanding by liberal democracies. Look at this historical timeline. He draws a direct line from these current Iran negotiations straight back to historical agreements like the 1945 Chongqing negotiations, the 1973 Paris Peace Accords, and the 1984 Sino-British Joint Declaration. The core of Tao Jie's argument is brilliant because it exposes the terminal naivety of liberal democracies. He draws a direct line from these Iran negotiations to the Sino-British Joint Declaration. Remember that one? Britain handed over Hong Kong, a beautiful piece of paper was signed, promises of one country, 2 systems were made, and everyone toasted with champagne. Fast forward a few decades, and the authoritarian regime openly declares that the treaty is a mere historical document with no practical binding power, shredded. See, humans in Washington never seem to learn this fundamental rule of nature. Authoritarian regimes don't view treaties as sacred vows. They view them as tactical pauses. It's what you do when you need the economic sanctions lifted or the heat turned down. You nod, you smile, you sign the parchment, and the second the pressure drops, you light the parchment on fire and use it to ignite your nuclear centrifuges. It's not failed diplomacy. It is highly successful deception. And the West falls for it every single time like a puppy chasing a laser pointer. But Tao Jie takes it a step deeper, into the truly dark mechanics of these regimes. He connects this disposable view of international law to how these systems view human life itself, specifically a cycle where children are treated as either disposable assets or state liabilities. Think about it. When the state needs cannon fodder or a demographic boom to fuel its factories, citizens are ordered to breed for the motherland. They are assets. When the economy tanks or resource management fails, those exact same children suddenly become state liabilities, to be regulated, restricted, or cast aside. It's a ruthless transactional loop where the individual means nothing. If a government views its own flesh and blood as interchangeable spreadsheet numbers, why on earth do Western leaders think a signature on a piece of paper is going to hold them back? It's pure delusion. And if you want grim warnings, just look at the nuclear surrender precedents. Ukraine surrendered its arsenal in 1991, and we all know how that turned out. They faced a massive invasion. Libya abandoned its nuclear program in 2011, and Gaddafi was overthrown. Saddam Hussein in Iraq lacked a true nuclear deterrent, and his regime completely collapsed. Iran has watched all of this unfold in high definition. It reinforces exactly why surrendering their nuclear capabilities is absolutely 100% off the table. Section 3. Loopholes in the memorandum. But hey, before I dismantle the rest of this diplomatic circus, a quick word from our sponsor. Me. If you want to keep hearing an unmuzzled German Shepherd tell you how the world actually works without a filter, hit that subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. If you leave a 1-star review because I offended your delicate, soft-boiled sensibilities, just know that I will find a way into your yard, and your prized hydrangeas will pay the ultimate price. Subscribe now. Okay, back to the loopholes. Let's apply this historical skepticism directly to the text of the current U.S.-Iran memorandum. Take Clause 1, a permanent end to all warfare. Sounds great, right? Wrong. It completely fails to address Iranian-funded proxy forces like Hezbollah in Lebanon. You literally cannot effectively declare an end to hostilities while a heavily armed proxy force remains fully active and funded on a regional border. Then there's the dark mechanics of Clause 2. Non-interference in internal affairs. If the West signs off on this, it basically gives the Iranian regime a free pass to violently suppress its own domestic reformists. Citizens who want freedom could face brutal, unchecked crackdowns, and Western governments wouldn't push back because they'd be legally bound by this exact non-interference clause. And Clause 6 is just absurd. It proposes a $300 billion reconstruction fund for Iran. But who exactly is supposed to pay for this? The expectation seems to be that Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE will just foot the bill. These are the very countries whose infrastructure was actively targeted by Iranian proxies during the conflict. It's a severe logical inconsistency. Which brings us to Section 4, Iran's 3 strategic cards. These are the absolute non-negotiable assets for the regime's survival. Tao Jie calls these yellow cards. They are core strategic assets that provide a nation with massive international leverage and guarantee regime survival against their adversaries. Giving these up would essentially be signing their own death warrant. So what are these specific cards? Card 1, the ability to throttle global shipping by controlling the Strait of Hormuz. Card 2, maintaining their nuclear technology and uranium enrichment as the ultimate deterrent. And Card 3, utilizing Hezbollah as a highly armed proxy force right on Israel's border. These are their absolute lifelines. And speaking of the Strait of Hormuz, there is a fascinating, massive loophole in Clause 5. It requires restoring merchant shipping, sure, but it doesn't explicitly forbid Iran from eventually treating the strait like a giant toll booth. They could just declare it internal waters and start charging every passing cargo ship a transit fee. Boom, massive new revenue stream. Finally, Section 5, diplomacy as a halftime. Let's bring this whole analysis home. Engaging in these negotiations, even if they are destined to fail, is a highly successful act of strategic deception. Just look at the tactical goals here. Iran gains time to rebuild its infrastructure and military. They relieve massive economic pressure through lifted sanctions. They literally just outlast opposing U.S. administrations and political cycles, all while maintaining the shiny facade of diplomacy so they can keep their core leverage. And this creates a massive fracture on the global stage. You have Western diplomatic optimism on one side, desperately seeking a signature on a piece of paper to magically end the conflict. But then you have Israel's existential reality on the other. They're facing an immediate frontline proxy threat, and they know damn well that a piece of paper won't stop Hezbollah missiles. They cannot accept a diplomatic framework that leaves an active proxy threat right on their doorstep. So, it leaves us with one incredibly provocative question. Can traditional diplomatic frameworks ever successfully constrain a nation that views negotiations simply as another front of warfare? Let's wrap this up. We have to give credit where credit is due for keeping this broadcast on the rails. A huge, glowing shout out to my producer, FireflyHaku. Honestly, FireflyHaku manages this entire show with the exact same blind, unearned optimism as a UN diplomat drafting an arms control treaty with a rogue state. The only difference is, when FireflyHaku tells me to stop barking at the mailman, I at least pretend to listen for 5 seconds before ignoring it completely. Thanks for listening, you beautiful, easily deceived bipeds. Keep your eyes open, your guard up, and never trust a politician who smiles too much. Catch you next time on